Hey guys, Solid here and welcome back to another episode of Adventure News where we talk the latest, the greatest, and sometimes the hated adventure and dual sport stories. And today we have brand new spy shots of Aprilia's middleweight adventure bike. They're much clearer this time, so we really should be able to get a clear idea of what this Tuareg 660 is all about. I'm also going to ask the question, should the Tenere 700 be worried, as this bike looks like it's going to be some pretty stiff competition for the Yamaha. So let's roll that intro and get into it. So let's just jump straight into the images and then I'll give my thoughts towards the end of the video. If you're not familiar with it, there aren't too many specifications out just yet, but basically it's using the parallel twin out of Aprilia's other 660 motorcycles. In the trim for the sports bike, it makes about 100 horsepower. Of course, I expect them to down tune that a little bit to provide more torque and usability, at least for off-road applicability. So if we look at the image straight away, we can see that this definitely looks like an adventure bike. We've got some features that I really wanted to see. It does look like we get a 21-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear wheel with spoked wheels, importantly. So it looks like they have gone for at least a dirt-capable adventure bike. This isn't just a road bike with some 19-inch cast wheel chucked on the front and called an adventure bike. It does look like Aprilia have made this bike with intention for off-road use in mind. So those spoke wheels are a good sign. The suspension also looks reasonably long travel, so that's really encouraging. And the ground clearance seems to suggest that as well. You can see that there's a fairly large bloke on there, so that suspension would be fairly taxed at this point, and the fact that it still maintains a reasonable amount of ground clearance is a good indication of the suspension being at least capable off-road. So that's another positive sign. Now the looks of the bike, that Cyclops headlight, it looks very utilitarian at the moment. It looks much more like Tenere 700s rather than kind of KTM's anorexic triceratops look that they've got going at the moment. So whether you like the overcomplicated look or this utilitarian look, it definitely is distinguishable. The question is, will this remain for the production bike? Who knows? It does seem that this might be the case, as when we've seen spy shots from Aprilia in the past, it usually is that they do show a production ready bike in the spy shots, aesthetically speaking. So I think we should expect that this bike will look fairly similar in production form. Of course, it's hard to tell whether those are LED lights or not. I would expect so. I mean, in modern times, we kind of expect the best. So they should have LED lights all around on this bike, hopefully. Another thing to talk about, or at least you might be asking, is what are those strange yellow bars? I certainly don't think those are the crash bars that will come with a bike. They might not even be crash bars in this picture. They might be holding some sensors in place. Of course, they could be a quickly knocked up fabricated job to protect the engine while they're out riding. I do not expect this to be on the bike when it comes to production, so do not worry about it. I think it's just something they're using for the testing purposes of the motorcycle. Also, if we go to the rear, we can see that it does look like it has LED brake lights and indicators. There is, of course, that computer box up on the top obscuring the rear a little bit. It's kind of hard to get an idea of the finished product. We can also see that exhaust. It does look quite out of place and quite large. I would expect this to look quite different in production. Of course, it still will be quite large considering how restricted these bikes are for the emission standards these days, but I think it will look very differently and perhaps a little more aesthetically pleasing. But given prior examples of exhausts in the past, who knows how ugly it could get. This could be the best we could see it. It could be the worst. Who knows at this point. The tank looks fairly reasonably sized, and it also looks quite similarly shaped to what you see on the Tiger models from Triumph, where you've got quite a groove for your legs to fit in, and then it kind of fans out above your knees to increase that fuel capacity. I'm not quite sure on the size of this petrol tank. I would expect something between maybe 15 and 20 litres. Whether this petrol tank is more to the 15 or 16 litre size or up to the 20 litre size, time will only tell. If Aprilia were smart, I think they could do something like the Africa Twin and offer a lighter version with a smaller tank and a bigger tourer version with a larger tank. The seating position looks like the standard seating position you can expect on an adventure bike. The handlebars are raised to accommodate standing on the bike. It doesn't look like your legs are cramped and your feet are sitting almost underneath you, taking a lot of pressure off your spine. So this is really good to see and should make a balanced and comfortable seating position. So that's also positive, as I have ridden a few adventure bikes lately where they've just unashamedly been taken from road bikes and they haven't really addressed the complications and the compromises that come with a sport bike seating position, and they haven't corrected that enough, and it really has made for a strange and uncomfortable experience when riding it off-road. So it's good to see Aprilia are nailing that standard adventure bike seating position straight out of the box. We can also see some fairly nice components on this. We've got dual front discs with Brembo brakes up front, so Aprilia certainly aren't stinging us on componentry here, at least high-end components. It's nice to see on a middleweight high-end Brembo brakes, so great to see Aprilia putting some effort in there. I think we should also expect some fairly decent suspension here, or at least a specification where you can get a model that is up spec, as that's kind of what Aprilia does and what sets them apart from a lot of Japanese manufacturers is that high-end componentry. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is something we find on this middleweight adventure bike. So in talking about the high-end componentry, that brings us to what I think about this bike so far. I think this is going to be fairly strong competition to the Tenere 700, but not in a direct way. It's definitely carving out its own niche. So if you think about the adventure bike market at the moment, we've got the very utilitarian, the reasonably priced, I would say, Tenere 700. It is expensive for a lot of people, but when you look at other middleweights, it certainly is far cheaper than the competition. And then you've got the KTM on the other end, which is very high tech, very off-road focused, and very, very expensive. So I think this Tuareg 660, like the KTM, will have high-end components, and like the KTM, it will have a lot of technology on it that the Tenere 700 just doesn't. So think of things like traction control, a lot more customability there, maybe even cruise control, wheelie control, all those kinds of electronic features that we've come to expect on these bikes. But I also don't think it will be as powerful as the KTM. It will probably follow suit like the Tenere and be more usable power, user-friendly. It will also likely be lighter, and it won't be so extreme in its design either. So it will be very interesting to see how this bike does. A lot of Aprilia owners did chime in, and most of you said you had a pretty good experience with Aprilia ownership. You said where Aprilia did really fall down was in the dealership experience. Once you bought the bike, your experience of owning the bike wasn't that great with support from your dealerships. You said was pretty poor. So that's something to consider as well with these bikes is, will there be the dealership support once you get one of these bikes? That's another big question to ask. But so far, I think it looks like a pretty decent attempt from Aprilia. Now, they're no strangers to the middleweight adventure bike game, so don't start thinking that, oh, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know the off-road world. That's completely incorrect. Aprilia have been in the off-road game and been doing it very well for many, many years. So I would expect they know what they're doing with this motorcycle. Of course, you might be asking, why am I so excited about this? I often get asked, where do I find my enthusiasm for all different kinds of off-road bikes? Considering that my real love is lightweight dual sports. Well, I do like middleweight adventure bikes, and I'm especially excited at the moment because of the attention middleweights are getting. Like I said, more and more recently, bikes have been getting bigger, heavier, unwieldy. You get to the top of the line GS, it practically comes with a barista. It's just getting crazy at the moment with how much crap they put on these bikes. So the fact that they're focusing back on lighter weight, more utilitarian bikes is fantastic in my eyes. And really, I'm hoping that, like all things, this market will become saturated. That will force manufacturers to look to the lightweight dual sports. And we've seen signs of that with the KLX 300 and the CRF 300L. So that's ultimately why I'm very excited for these adventure bikes. But the other reason is I like having two bikes in my garage. So my number one bike is always a lightweight dual sport, but my number two bike is, generally speaking, a nice comfy adventure bike. So the more the merrier. I'm definitely excited to see the middleweight adventure bike market heat up again, as I think they've got too big and too heavy. They're practically big adventure bikes at the moment. So I think a refocus at this 600-700cc size is fantastic, and it only speaks to more good things for the lighter weight market in the future. So that's about it for me from this episode of Adventure News. Don't forget to hit that like button, and welcome to all the new subscribers, this weird little part of the internet that I call My home is really growing at the moment, so it's fantastic to see. It is very encouraging. So thank you for all your support. And until next time, guys, don't forget to stay shiny side up, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.